everybody, this is Johnny from Beers in the Lot podcast. Welcome to episode 4. Today we're going to talk about certain hockey levels and the bell curve and where we fit in. Just a quick surprise, it's not super high. We also touched on Tampa Bay clapping the Isles' cheeks in Game 1. And is this the possible bubble fatigue creeping in again for more NHL teams, including the Isles? Also, we'll touch quickly on the Capitals' search for a head coach, and we drift further and further into the deep abyss that is us becoming a Toronto Maple Leafs podcast. Thanks, hope you enjoy.
Prepare beers.
Yes.
Prepare your beers, gentlemen. Are we ready?
Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's crack them open.
Shaking the cup tonight, John. What are you drinking, John?
Yeah, what is that?
So I have, why is everyone inquisitive?
You can see my beer in the camera.
Yeah. I have some 100 proof Knob Creek bourbon.
Whoa.
All right.
So just a little nightcap, nothing
Going
serious.
hard in the paint.
Yeah,
So you're
just
telling
a
me
little
that
nightcap.
this is whiskey in the lot then?
With bourbon and lots.
Bourbon in the lot. All right, my bad.
Cocktails in a lot, whatever. What about you, Danny?
I'm like Jackie Moon tonight. I'm getting tropical haze DNA from Green Flash Brewery.
There we go.
Yeah.
Oh boy,
Oh yeah, it's tasty.
All that.
that's good stuff.
What about you, Aaron? Are you driving a fishing boat over there?
Yes, sir. I need a bigger boat. We've been saying it. We need to make this a Jaws podcast, so I'm doing my part. I'm drinking a Narragansett tonight in the Quint can.
Crush it
Limited
like
edition,
Quint.
1975 Quint can.
Crush
Excellent.
it like Quint.
That's right. How about you,
That's
Rizby?
awesome.
Well, I have a fine West Coast IPA from Attaboy Beer right here in Frederick, Maryland. It's called Hella Hella. It's very good.
I got the locals.
Yeah, I got to give the locals a shout out, especially Attaboy Beer, because they sponsored the jerseys for one of the teams I play for. So
Right on.
definitely have to shout them out as much as possible.
We'll allow that pandering. We'll allow that.
You think if we go in there with you, they'll give us some beer chips?
Well, it depends. It depends. We could tell that story later, but yeah.
I think that's something that we're going to have to start doing once playoffs are over. We'll start bringing it home and talk about some local, like the stories from our leagues and stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
We've got hours of stories to tell.
I mean, even from this last week, we've been skating pickups because there's no games because of COVID times. And there were a couple players in one of the pickups last week that I guess played at a little bit higher levels than any of us ever did. So Aaron and I started having a running text conversation about, where are they and where are we at level? And I don't know. What was your idea on that, Aaron?
Well, we were trying to think, it's like, okay, if you take every hockey player from the guy who's putting on skates for the first time all the way up to name the greatest of all time, if that is a 0 to 100% scale, 0 being absolute zero skill and 100 being the most skill in the game, then where do we fall? And you really have to it's kind of hard to put your finger on all this, because as you get to the very end of the scale, then there's only like a couple guys up there. But at the very beginning of the scale, there's millions or whatever. I don't actually know how many people are playing hockey in the world, of course. But if I had to guess, you're probably farther up the scale than you think you are. I bet you that we're probably around 30 to 40%, because there's so many higher leagues than us. Like the way that where we're playing at, somebody figured we're 43 levels down from the NHL or something.
Well, I think the official Old Fat Ball Guys tagline is the 47th slowest level in the world. So
That's
There
the
you go.
47th percentile. Well, and then, yeah, so you take kind of like your NHL guys, then your AHL guys, then your East Coast guys, then probably your, you can insert European Pro, etc., NCAA, high-level juniors, Putin, because he plays in the All-Star games for the KHL.
Right.
And then after that, it's kind of people who either played here, played there, and then you kind of got those wild cards like people that they're really good hockey players, are really smart. Maybe they're a little lazier than others, so they're really good, but they're kind of lazy. And then you look at even some of the guys we play with, they put their tri pants on too much and whatnot. But I think 40-ish%. That sounds about right. Maybe
right in the middle.
Yeah, we'll say the middle. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I kind of characterized it early on as like a bell curve, right? The traditional bell curve in school where your low scores are at one end and your high scores are at the other, and everybody else kind of falls in the middle. But I think you really characterize it the right way, where it's really just kind of like a curve from left to right, where almost everybody's on the left-hand side, and it exponentially gets better as you move to the right, and the skill goes up and up and up.
It's like a downwards, I don't actually know the name for it, downward slope curve or something like that. I'm not a math guy either, but it starts really, really high, and then it's just a massive cliff that turns into a small rolling hill as you get further out to 100%.
You mean we don't have any math guys on the team?
We have no math guys on this podcast.
Well, the kicker about it is, right, like, if I always think about too, like there's a diversity in talent level that we skate with and we've skated with over the years, right? And then there's also diversity in like just the people that we hang out with too. I mean, we play and skate with a lot of really smart people from different backgrounds, scientific backgrounds, all kinds of stuff going on. So I always find that probably more interesting than like where people played when they were
definitely,
in 16 and under hockey or whatever.
Mm-hmm. So some of the guys in our league who most people might characterize as the lower end of the skill level are the most interesting people in the league.
That's right.
They have stories for days about their life that could keep you entertained. Write Netflix series, documentaries on them, no problem.
Maybe
that's definitely the interesting stuff.
Maybe we should think about inviting local guests on.
I bet you we could fill a show with that for sure. So what are we doing now? We're in intermission with the Dallas and Vegas right now. But they're up 3-0.
Yep.
Yeah.
We were looking at that clip from Kucherov earlier that Daniel shared. That was pretty cool.
That was nasty.
The pass coming out of point, and then Kucherov just flips it and
tip pass.
Just a little tip that went right over the defender's stick. It was perfect.
He made a ramp with his blade. Yeah. It was unreal.
At speed in a rush in an Eastern Conference final game.
And the puck ends up right on Braden Point's stick.
Exactly.
He is flying at full speed, and he's one of the fastest guys still left in this thing. I mean, unreal play.
Yeah.
So cool.
And two, the one thing I kind of mentioned, with Point about that whole play, what Kucherov did was very special, definitely the highlight. But Braden Point, as soon as that puck touches Kuch's toe, it's almost like he knew what was going to happen. He didn't change a single thing. It was almost like they wrote it up on the iPad on the bench. And we're like, we'll get a sauce. I'm going to toe it to you off my blade. You're going to skate down the far side. I'm going to cut to the middle. You pass it over, and I'll tap it in. It'll be insanely easy right through the 5-hole. And they're like, okay.
How did he draw that up on the iPad?
Yeah, you probably need like the John Madden Telestrator for that.
No, he used the actual iPad to show how his blade needed to be angled.
The exact angle.
Yeah.
Kucherov, mathematician.
That's right. Yes. Big math guy.
Big math and geometrics and physics guy.
Well, since we're kind of on the topic of mathematics and all that jazz.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it'll be all the fun stuff. What so with kind of 4 teams left as of today. This is Tuesday evening. This should release Wednesday afternoon. You have Vegas, Dallas currently in intermission, like we said. Tampa and the Islanders played last night. The Islanders got smoked. Statistically, even in, you could almost say effort. I mean, they definitely were playing. They definitely were a little feisty, but in terms of puck possession numbers and shot attempts, it was a total disaster for them. Do you think Lane Lambert and Barry Trotz can really kind of figure something out to stifle that Tampa defense and offense?
I think so. So they did have a bright spot in the second period where they kind of took control of the puck for a little bit, and that showed up in the shot attempts and the numbers too. But you're right. For the most part, they were dominated in the whole game. I think maybe like coming into a new series, maybe they went into too much of a protective shell defensively, and they just kind of sat back and let Tampa come to them. And maybe they didn't take advantage of the opportunities that were presented to them to rush the puck and create some offense. And then once, Tampa got rolling, it was all over. I think with a team like Tampa, they have to play very much the way that they did with Washington, and we'll get to Washington a little bit later, I think, in the conversation. But they never let the Capitals get into any games, right? They came out and they played the way that they want to play. They just strangled them on the outside of the ice. They got to do the same thing to Tampa, and don't wait for that game to happen, right? They need to force the issue. I think Trotz can figure it out. I think Lane Lambert can figure it out. They have the right coaching staff. Everybody knows
those guys
that.
are smart enough. The one thing that really stuck out to me with Tampa, and I guess when you put 8 goals in a game against 2 decent goalies, Grice was pulled after 9 shots, letting 3 goals in. But Tampa's D did a great job of those first passes out of the zone, whether it was under pressure or they had a little bit of time. The first pass was very crisp. It went exactly where it needed to go. And the other thing too, and we've said this almost throughout the entire playoffs about any team that's had success, it's the fast transition from puck in your defensive zone to the neutral zone to getting into the offensive zone.
Yeah.
In Tampa, I mean, between their defense, and there's a lot of names there too. Braden Coburn didn't even play last night. He's actually a pretty solid defenseman, but they had Eric Chernak, Shattenkirk, who's really, after getting bought out by the Rangers, had a really good season, and he's looked pretty good. Hedman, who's awesome. He'll be a Norris candidate for the next couple of years. McDonough, you could say he's had somewhat of a revival since getting down there. I think having less minutes, him being sheltered by Hedman, almost helps him a little bit because the stuff he does really well, he can do
right.
In that kind of second slot, third slot role. And Bogosian's played too for them. I mean, another D who was in Buffalo kind of got abused just because that's the Buffalo team, unfortunately. But he's had a really great season and series and whatnot down there too. So I mean, you look at the D core, they're pretty solid. In Tampa, even though they drafted really well, they weren't afraid to go out and make moves. I kind of really respect that out of that team. Vegas is the only other team you could say at this point really went out and made a move or two, whether it was free agency or trade this year, that did something to kind of go, we can't draft at the moment, but we can make a move to make ourselves better for this year. I like that about that team.
I know John and I talked about it before everybody was on here, but Tampa went 58 minutes and 53 seconds without missing the net. The first shot that missed the net was Paquette. 67 seconds left to go.
Yeah, so that means
that's crazy.
Well, so that means if the Islanders didn't block the shot, it was hitting their net.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a team, right, that blocks a ton of shots because they don't necessarily have the puck that much. So if they're not blocking shots and their goalie's having to work that much harder, and shots are going to go in the net, right? It's just the law of averages at that point, I would think. I did see a thing. I'm a big, what were the results 5-on-5 guy. I think I saw that Tampa outscored them 4-1, 5v5. So obviously they completely dominated the game. I mean, anybody that watched the game understands that, but if you want to look at it a little bit more tactically and looking at the next game, Trotz and his staff have their work cut out for them. That's for sure. So that's a great question to ask. Like, can they turn it around in such a short time?
Well, then who do you go with? Do you go with Varlamov, who, when he played, I mean, you could say whatever you want about the announcers, but I was somewhat with him. He kind of looked a little out of it. Maybe that's because he wasn't expecting to start last night or get in the game. And then Grice, like I said, he let in 3 goals on 9 shots. Who do you go with?
Yeah, I don't know. I have a soft spot for Varlamov just, because of his history and, with the Caps and everything. But I don't know. I think, like, it's an 8-2 game in the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's kind of a throw the tape away game too. I would think if you're a coach, like, hey guys, we got shelled. Let's get back to what we do well and move on from it. I think that's got to be the message in a general sense. I'm sure there's other more specific things that they need to figure out, but I would think the message is, hey guys, it was an 8-2 game in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Like, let's just move on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and Danny, maybe I know we talked about it a little bit. As the playoffs go on and on, especially as now it gets a little more into crunch time, conference finals appearances on the line. You've been away from your family in this bubble for so long. Games matter more. And just watching the teams that got eliminated the last round out of those game 7s, they look so upset just emotionally. And even they looked so tired when it was all done. Do you think that plays a factor now to that mental grind being in the bubble, kind of thinking, oh man, we're down 1-0, or even, oh my God, we're playing this team and they're just shellacking us? What do you think that plays into mentally?
I think mentally you kind of just got to start over, right? Clean slate it. Try to get on the board early. Next game, try to get on the board early, get something going. You just got to push that out of your head. 8-2. Just take it as a loss. Right? Just say, well, we lost. I'm not looking at the score.
Yeah.
You're down 0-1.
We just lost. So
right.
we're down 0-1.
You didn't lose the series, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. I think they have a bounce back game next game. Not saying they're going to win it, but I think they show up better than they did the first game.
Tampa, though, I really like the team. We show them a lot of love, but this is a team that's been in a very similar situation a few times already. They're in the conference finals. I can think of 2 times at least. One when they played the Pens, they were up 3-2. Pens came back. Brian Russ scored 2 in Game 7. A few years ago when the Caps won the Cup, were they up? Was Tampa up 3-1 at that point?
Yeah,
Riggs?
they were up. Yeah.
Yeah, they're up 3-1.
Washington forces the Game 7, and then if I can remember 2 years ago, they almost dominated them in that Game 7, and I think the Bolts were kind of shell-shocked at that point that, hey, we were on our way to another final and probably a Stanley Cup, and it just slipped right out of their hands. I don't think that's going to happen this time around. I think if it gets to a Game 7 this time around, it's going to be a back-and-forth series between these two teams, just because, like we've already said, right, like the Islanders, I think, are well-coached and they can figure out ways to slow Tampa down and, force the issue with them and play that underdog role.
Do you think the Islanders are too young, though?
That's a great question.
Well, I mean, going back to what we've said in previous podcasts, maybe too young is a good thing.
In this situation, yeah, maybe it is.
And if you kind of look at the other teams in the mix right now, those old guard players, if you will, like Jonathan Toews, Patrick Kane, Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Nick Backstrom, Alex Ovechkin, all those guys are gone. So, I mean, this is kind of the new group. Almost.
Is it though? I mean,
until one wins a cup, no.
That Tampa roster's been around for a long time, right? I mean,
that's very true. Yeah,
we just said, right, they've been to a cup final, they've been to multiple conference finals, they've been, they're almost a lock to, get out of first round series. I think, a guy like Hedman Killorn and these type of guys, they would beg to differ that they haven't, been around the block a couple times. I do agree with the theory, Danny, that like the younger guys from a mental aspect probably have an advantage because they don't have wives and babies and families at home and stuff like that. They're pretty much living sort of the same life that they would be during the season, I would think.
Right.
So maybe that helps them.
I would think just being kind of inexperienced would kind of play into it more with their performance on the ice. But yeah, like the mental aspect of them off the ice, they don't have. Well, I wouldn't say not all of them, but a lot of them are living the single bachelor life. So
yeah.
Not in the bubble.
Well, they're just hanging with the boys in the bubble, right?
Which I mean, we've gone over it before. Like that, it probably is getting old. But the other thing too, right? You're in the Final Four now, so you have a legit shot. Like you can taste it, right? Like if you're in that position. So the mentality's got to shift a little bit from, oh, we're stuck in the bubble in the qualifiers in the round robin to now, hey, we're in the conference final here. We're playing for a chance to go to the cup final and actually compete for the Stanley Cup. Like I would think that's got to go into it as a player.
And don't you think, Riggsy, Danny, Aaron, the Islanders are the only team that played in that play-in round. So that was one extra, granted you could make of what you will. They did have to play meaningful games early on, so that helped them very, in the early part of it. But having those, 3 some extra games, that kind of hurts them now. They exhausted a little bit in the tank. Maybe mentally they really had to get up for that. You don't know, but that may play a factor. All the other teams playing in the round robin.
Yeah, if it was after an 82 game season, I'd say yeah, absolutely. But they had like 3 months off.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I was gonna be like, I don't. Maybe their conditioning isn't up to snuff yet, and that might play a factor. But yeah, after an 82 game season, they should be ready to match that intensity in the playoffs, no problem.
I'd even say too, like going back to like the bubble fatigue thing, maybe there's a bubble hump that once you get over the bubble hump, that's like, hey, okay, all right, we're playing for the cup now, and it's just down to 4 teams.
Yeah.
Like now it's like the intensity of, okay, we're gonna win the championship now, guys.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what's going on. The rest of it's irrelevant. We're in this for the championship now. I wonder if you get over that hump, and then you're coasting in terms of fatigue.
Yeah.
Would you say Dallas
the championship kicking in?
Would you say the Dallas Stars got over that hump in Game 6 in round 1 against the Flames? I think if there's any team that's been a Jekyll and Hyde, it's been them.
So I think
maybe it's different for each team.
Yeah, right. Because they're almost like little families or little communities, right? Because they, I don't think they're, especially now, right, where it's only the 4 teams. They're not socializing much together. Right. So,
so I think early on they probably were, but I think at this point there's not much socializing.
But even like let's say like the first round, right? I bet there wasn't a lot going on amongst the teams after the first game or two. And so then you're in the bubble inside the bubble, right? You're with all your boys and you have your weird like cultural things that you do within your team, and the other teams aren't going to get that and stuff. And I think like with all that going on, I think what Aaron's saying is like you kind of go into that shell and when you do that, does it help you, and then you're just in the every other day grind of the playoffs. And the bumps and bruises don't matter as much, and your legs being super tired in the morning don't matter as much, Does
Because
that
it's the cup. as
right?
they say.
Because you're singular.
Yeah, it's a singular focus.
Singular
Right.
focus. Even like for a lot of these guys, like their whole lives, right? They've been training for this and striving for this moment. They finally got to that
It's in
place.
sight now.
Yeah, and call it running on adrenaline or whatever you want to call it. Like you're showing up and you're just trying to pursue that dream, I think. And who's cracking beers?
Who was that?
Who's fake cracking beers?
That's me. That's me.
What you opening now?
I got the 6-point brewery meltdown.
Daniel, on a school night?
It's a heavy boy. It's a heavy boy.
Gosh.
Yeah.
School night.
It's a
Wow.
pound. It's a pounder.
Good for you,
That's a
man.
big can, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, also, I'm curious, since we'll pivot now. Big Washington Caps guy, Eric Rigsby. So they have
Yes.
interviewed 3 coaches up to this point:
Yes.
Babcock,
Boo.
Peter Laviolette, and
Boo.
Gerard Gallant.
Yay.
And according to what Elliot Friedman said with Chris Johnston earlier today, and I was also reading a little more, Laviolette and Babcock are the front runners.
Yeah, because
Why?
Because so we kind of I think we talked about Reardon before, right? And so there's rumors going around, and Friedman talked. Well, I don't know if he talked directly about it. He kind of goes around things sometimes because I think he has information that he can't like say.
Well, I think he's a polite about it
Yeah,
too.
and he wants to keep his sources happy, and that's whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he does a good job. It's just it's annoying sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think it causes more issues in other media outlets where they'll take that stuff and run with it. Especially like locally or like what's his name with The Athletic going on his he's a podcaster. Right?
Yeah.
And he's saying it was the Caps were there on vacation and they were just partying the whole time. It didn't really want to compete. Okay, fine. You could say that there probably was a little bit of that going on just because the rumors are very strong that like Reardon was not looked at as an authority figure. Like he was the coach and he kind of implemented certain tactics and systems and he told them what times practices were and things like that. But he did not foster like the same culture that Barry Trotz had, which was, hey guys, I'm not going to sit here and like be your dad, but we're a family, and for us to all be successful, we've all got to play our part and do the right things. The rumors are that Reardon like didn't continue that and couldn't because he didn't have the ears of the players. And so now the reaction is, I think, let's go the complete opposite direction. Let's get more like authoritarian and more strict coaching influence in here. So let's get someone like Laviolette, who's not necessarily known as a player's coach, right? Or let's get a Babcock in here who, I mean, we all follow the stories from
Winning
him. Well, does he? I mean, the guy's
Ish.
We have a laundry list of things we
the
could say
guys-
about that.
right. I mean, and there's plenty of more famous podcasters, bloggers, social media personalities, insiders that know the horror stories of Mike Babcock and what he has done to players in the organizations that he's coached for. He has some success. He coached Canadian Olympic teams to gold. Okay, great. It's Canadian Olympic team. You're stacking the team with
You're the favorite on day one.
the top percent of the top percent of pro hockey players in the world. Like, okay, fine.
And he coached the stacked Red Wings.
Right. He coached
Yeah.
he coached an
Hall of
absolutely
Fame.
stacked Red Wings
Jesus.
team. He inherited it, right? And he
Right.
was only able to coach them to one Stanley Cup in that time. Right?
That's right. Thanks,
so-
Dan Balsma.
And then and then we hear about all the things that he's done to individual players to like put them in really bad situations and wreck careers. And I don't want to repeat them because they're all out there. There's people that are way more famous than us. And also, I don't have firsthand knowledge of it. But there's enough of it there where there's smoke, there's fire. And that's exactly not the right type of coach to come in the back end of careers for guys like Nick Backstrom, Alex Ovechkin, who, oh, by the way, needs a contract. And if you really want him to even get close to Gretzky's record still in a Capitals uniform, you better get the coaching situation right. Because I think he's waiting to see who they hire. And that's why they've suspended talks. So
Makes sense.
that's, you know, there's other people that have said that, but I actually think that's what's going on. I think he kind of decided, you know what, I need to see who's going to be here before I decide to stay. As hard as that might be, you know.
What does he have left on that contract?
Nothing.
1 year.
Really?
This upcoming season,
Yeah.
he's an unrestricted.
Wow.
So they got to do something. They got to talk now. Like and hopefully they're talking to him about the coaching situation. So then the third guy, right, is Gallant. He's probably of everybody that's out there, he's probably the right guy. Because he understands the modern game. He's been successful at it. He's been sort of the victim of streaks of poor play a couple times, right? Especially with like the Vegas situation. I didn't really understand that unless something happened, you know, internally. But I don't think there was any reason why he shouldn't still be there.
No.
The only thing I still could think of it, maybe there was something there where it was just too much, because there was a shakeup a little bit in the front office where Brad McCrimmon took over the general manager position. George
they
McPhee
moved,
went to
yeah.
president of hockey operations.
Yeah.
And initially, early last year, during the offseason, Brad McCrimmon interviewed somewhere as a general manager. I forget where at this point.
Yeah.
But he interviewed, and then within 3 days, they had that little shakeup. And I don't know if maybe that's something to the effect of, you know, there was a difference of opinion between Gallant, McPhee, Brad McCrimmon,
Right.
and then they kind of straightened it out. And then the other thing, too, Pete DeBoer was available. He's a very good, qualified head coach.
Yeah, he's fine. Yeah.
So I think maybe that's also, unfortunately, Gallant, it was kind of like wrong place, wrong time, where you're slumping, the team's not responding for whatever reason. Could be mid-season slump, could be something else going on. And then they're like, well, we have a perfectly qualified coach who, to be honest, any other team would be very fortunate to have. He's a very qualified coach, like we said.
Yeah.
And Gallant, unfortunately, was a short man out. And especially being as he did really well with the Vegas team in expansion mode, did really well with Florida before that. And like you said, he does a modern game. I just don't see Babcock or Laviolette being a fit.
Like,
There's nothing there that excites me, not even as a rival of the Caps where I'm like, oh, this will be great for the team. Like if they hire Babcock, I feel actually
terrible.
happier. I feel happier competing against the Capitals.
I mean, if people think that if people think that those players weren't motivated, like in bubble hockey, like add Babcock to the mix, and I think it gets way worse, especially with the personalities on that team. I think it's not good.
Well, and I think there's just too much.
It's not good.
I do
It's bad.
think, say whatever you want. Like there's always this talk among the NHLPA where it's like, the top 20% of moneymakers always make all decisions, and the guys that are like, in your entry level or lower level deals, they don't get much decision. But like the stuff that happened in Toronto, like all the players know about that when they get along, get around each other and talk at the PA meetings or even team buddies from other teams. They talk about that stuff. Like how do you look that guy in the face?
Like again, we're not a Leafs podcast.
We're not,
but,
not at all.
but like the Babcock Mitch Marner situation was like, that was published, right?
Exactly.
And like that whole thing was, Mike Babcock, as the head coach of the Maple Leafs, goes to Mitch Marner and basically asks him to write down all the guys that aren't trying hard and aren't doing what they're supposed to do, like rat out his teammates
In practice.
right? And so that Babcock could make lineup decisions. Like, I don't care what level you're at. I don't care, like NHL, it doesn't matter. You don't go to players and ask them to rate their teammates to make roster decisions. That is like,
That's your job.
right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's that, and also like it just drives wedges, in between the players and the coaching staff, groups of players and other players. Like there's always that. I mean, you guys know there's always sort of I don't know what you call it, but there's always sort of like a gap between the upper end players and the bottom half, right? I mean, they'll get along, but the sort of like superstars will kind of hang out together, and like the lower level players will kind of hang out together and stuff, and like you're just making that worse, and you're making it a negative thing.
Well, it's worse when you tell the other players about it.
Yeah.
In the worst.
Hey, by the way, you've been playing like shit, and Marner said you've been playing.
And the worst thing.
Yeah,
and the worst thing was it was Bozak and Kadri. It was Bozak and Kadri, two players they
now where
they got
are
rid
those
of.
guys?
Bozak's a Stanley Cup. Bozak's a Stanley Cup champion. You could say whatever you want about the Avalanche. If Francois and Grubauer and Eric Johnson get hurt, you could be talking about them in the conference finals. Oh, and by the way, Nazem Kadri, part of his top six, they had like almost something like 65% of their team's points throughout the run.
Yeah.
Putting up numbers.
Kadri, Rantanen, Lando, and McKinnon.
Yeah.
Those guys.
Kadri was up there with McKinnon
in
on
goals.
that team in goals. Like,
yep.
And in Toronto, he was a third line guy, sometimes saw power play time, got shit on by Babcock. Like, it just terrible situation for him there. He goes to Colorado and is killing it. Like,
oh yeah.
And it's
just,
and then you hear the story about Babcock going to Marner and telling him, like, you need to tell me who's not trying hard and who's screwing up in practice. Like,
yeah, that's ridiculous.
Unbelievable. And now he's a candidate to come coach the Caps.
Well, and also too, I'm curious what his paycheck's going to be from. Is Ted Leonsis really going to sign that check?
Well, that's the other thing, right? That guy, what was he making
it was like 5 or something.
Yeah, he was making like player money in Toronto.
Yeah. He was making almost as much money as Braden Point. And I would argue Braden Point has done more in the last 5 years than Mike Babcock. So
I want to stop you guys real quick here and say that it has been an absolute pleasure listening to Eric's mic all night. And this microphone arms race that's occurred over the last 3 or 4 podcasts.
The microphone.
He sounds like John said. He sounds like Barry Weiss. Or Barry White. Yeah,
he's
Barry
a pop
Weiss.
singer, right?
Hopefully you won't have to clean up too much in the post-production.
Oh no, the real question is who's going to buy the next mic. It might be me. I don't know. I'm waiting. I'm hoping that our OnlyFans idea.
I already have the Joe Rogan podcast studio coming to my house. Like the whole setup.
There we go.
I just wish I had video.
Yeah.
I can see you, but you can't see me. It is kind of like OnlyFans.
Yeah.
Where's your wish list on Amazon? I'll buy you something.
God. Right now it's a Chemex coffee maker and some hemp filters.
No, I was actually I was talking to one of the guys at pickup actually on Sunday, and they said, the first episode was painful.
It was painful. It was bad.
We couldn't even.
It was
but
bad.
yeah, some of our mics were not good. So this microphone arms race is definitely paying dividends.
All right, who are we headhunting?
I'm not dropping names.
Who said that? Who said that?
It was, and that's our show.
No.
So don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Beers in the Lot and on OnlyFans so that we can continue our mic arms race. Be sure to rate us and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and we will see you guys next week.